Welcome to the Business Talk, a global podcast series that highlights distinguished faculty members and their impactful scholarly contributions. I'm Deepak, your host from India. Imagine a scientist who has spent 4 decades standing at the crossroads of mathematical logic and computing, not just asking how machines work, but why they think the way they do. The scientist is Dr. Moshe Vardi. It's a privilege to have him join us today on Business Talk. Before we get started, I would like to introduce the guest for today's episode. A university professor and the Karen Ostrum George Distinguished Service Professor in Computational Engineering at Rice University. Professor Vardi has authored over 800 scientific papers, garnered over more than 50,000 citations, and left an indelible mark on the fields of automated reasoning, model checking, and database theory, work that forms the very bedrock of modern computer science and artificial intelligence. His journey began at Bar Ilan University and the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, where he earned his PhD in 1981. He sharpened his intellect at Stanford University and IBM Research before finding his academic home at Rice University in 1993, a home he has graced for over 3 decades. Today, he stands among the most decorated minds in his field, a member of both the US National Academy of Engineering and the National Academy of Sciences, the recipient of 7 honorary doctorates, and the 2026 laureate of the National Academy of Artificial Intelligence Academy Award, the highest honor in artificial intelligence in research. But perhaps what makes Dr. Vardi truly remarkable is this: he refuses to let science exist in a vacuum. He is a fearless public voice on the societal responsibilities that come with the rise of computing, AI, and automation. In today's episode, Professor Moshe Vardi joins us to unpack something both profound and urgent: his groundbreaking work on can AI have a mind, logic, consciousness, and the limit of machines. A question that philosophers have pondered for centuries, now placed under the lens of one of the world's sharpest computational minds. I can promise you this is a conversation that you will not to mince. Without further delay, please join me in welcoming Professor Moshe Vardi to Business Talk. Professor Vardi, thank you for accepting our invitation. A warm welcome to you on Business Talk.
Namaste.
Thank you. Professor, you pose a bold question on World Logic Day. Are AI minds genuine minds? A question that sits at the intersection of philosophy, mathematics, and computer science. What moment in your career first made you stop and ask, wait, can this machine actually think?
So the question, can machine think, is actually, turn out you can trace it back to the 19th century. So in the 19th century, people already had the idea of computers. They were not able yet to build computers, but they thought that computers can be built. They had the idea of computers. And they started speculating, if we build these computers, will they be able to think? And there were some debates, do machines think? And so the first wave of, if you actually trace when people start talking about the thinking machine, you find in the 19th century, which I find quite amazing because there were no computers in the 19th century. Then in the 1940s, the first computers are being built. And then people start to think, what is this thing? So today, we just say a computer. But you have to understand, until the 1940s, if you say a computer, it referred to a person whose job was to compute. Computing was a job for people. There was a need for computing. People computed, and a person it was a job title, computer. Then now we suddenly build machines that can compute. So at the beginning, people even know what to call them. Some call them thinking machines. Some call them robot brains. Some call them mathematical robots. I mean, there were different terminology what to call them. Eventually, we kind of end up calling them computers, which is a good thing. It kind of does not grab. It does not try to make any philosophical claim. But you find discussions about whether machines can think already in the late 1940s, people started philosophical debate started in the 1940s. Okay. I mean, there was the Turing wrote his first paper on machine intelligence in 1950, but the earlier draft that go back to 1948. And this is all because in 1945 and 46, we suddenly have computing machines. So are these machines thinking? So in some sense, I would say the debate has started then, and it's never ended. We still are trying to say, will this machine do something that we do? We think of ourselves as we think. So are this machine thinking? And I think in particular, it became suddenly very urgent in a question when in late 2022, OpenAI released ChatGPT. Suddenly, ChatGPT can talk, and he talks very good. It's the quality is very good. He speaks English better than for me, English is a second language. So in some sense, ChatGPT speak English better than me, and you can have what we would call intelligent conversation with it. And we'll come back in a minute to the Turing test. So the question comes again: what are these things? Okay, and even more amazingly, there is now a new field of thought, and it's called AI welfare. And these things, okay, we typically, human being things, and we treat human being with dignity and respect, or at least we are supposed to. Are we supposed to? Do we have any debt of care to this machine? If this machine are thinking, maybe we owe them something. So people talk about robots' rights and AI welfare because maybe these are some kind of entities that we should treat with respect. So I would say is that on one hand, it's an old question going back to the 19th century. At the same time, it became a very urgent question with the emergence of large language model and generative AI in late 2022.
Professor, the word mind means very different things to a philosopher, a neuroscientist, and a computer scientist. As a logician, how do you even begin to define a mind? And why does the definition matter so much before we can answer whether AI has one?
So I think the interest in the question, so one is, as a logician, I don't try to define mind. That's not my area of interest. So Daniel Kahneman, in a 2011 book, coined this phrase as system one and system two. And he said the human mind actually, in some sense, are two very different minds. In one box, you have two different minds. And one box is the what we call the lizard brain, and that acts mostly by pattern recognition. So when I drive and I see a stop sign, I don't go start analyzing, okay, 5 fingers, the middle one is the longest, or it's a picture of a hand. I don't do that. I just say, it's obvious to me, this is a hand, okay? Nobody needs to go and do any analysis. It's a hand, okay? On the other hand, this road sign of this means stop. This is a rule that I learned, okay? And this is very different. So Daniel Kahneman said, we have two type of systems in our head. So system one is this intuitive pattern recognition. This is what machine learning typically would describe. And system two would be the one, just to go back to, imagine you are in the African savannah and you see something yellow moving in the grass. You say, this is a lion. And you don't go to, let's pick up the feces and do DNA analysis. Something yellow moving in the grass, it's a lion, and you run away. And this is system one. Then you go to the village and you say, we need to hunt a lion. And you make a plan. You guys ambush. We will go from this angle. You go from that angle. Now we use reasoning. This is system two. So our mind is not one simple thing, a mind. Our mind is complicated. And in fact, there was a phrase that came and I forgot now who coined it, but it's called the society of minds. We really have inside our head many different minds. And in fact, there is a kind of a theory that this unity that we feel, it's kind of an illusion. And this came partly because we have these two chambers in our head, and they are connected by something called corpus callosum. And in the 1960s, they discovered that people would have seizures, epileptic seizures. You can improve that by cutting the corpus callosum. This is a very radical surgery, and they stopped doing it after a few years. But they have done it enough that there are dozens of people who have two brains that do not talk to each other. And then people start doing experiments on them. Do these people have one mind or two minds? And the answer is they seem to have one mind. And the conclusion was the unity of the mind is an illusion created by the brain. Actually, we have inside different pieces, but at the end, there is one editor who creates a uniform story. So we feel there is just the self. We have one self. But this is even, in some religion, Buddhism debates whether the self exists. So to me, this is a philosophical question, and I will not get into it. Why does it matter? Well, it matters now because we interacted with entity that they seem to be intelligent. We'll come back to say what does it mean for them to be. They seem to be intelligent, and we kind of want to know. We have a lot of respect for intelligence. For example, we now know that octopods, the plural of octopus, are quite intelligent, are very intelligent. They're the very intelligent animal. And many people now don't want to eat octopus because they're so intelligent. And you can ask, what does it have anything to do with anything? But people kind of, if something is intelligent, I treat it with more respect. And so there are people who now refuse to eat octopus. I mean, I'm vegetarian, so I don't eat octopus. But there are people who won't eat octopus because they're so intelligent. And people debate, do octopods have a mind? Even they ask, do they have a soul? If you think it's hard to define a mind, try to define a soul. Okay, it's even more difficult. Try to define a soul. We think that we talk about as if human beings have souls. So, it's again very, very debatable. So people kind of, we have this new entity on the planet, and they're kind of a little bit like us, very different than us. They're disembodied, but they can talk like us. So what are they? We're trying to understand what are they. And I think that's partly where the questions, do they have a mind? That's where it comes from. And then how should we treat them? I remember a science fiction movie from some years ago where they built some kind of a robot, and then they decided, no, they have a reason to try to dismantle the robot. And the robot, who of course looks like a beautiful woman, start crying. Don't turn me off. Don't turn me off. I'm alive now. Don't kill me, essentially. So if we take a robot, imagine if there's a robot with LLM inside and the robot talks, if you turn it off, are you killing someone? So these questions, on one hand, you can say it's a very philosophical question, but we are trying to make sense of the world around us, and we have, I would call, human-like entities around us. We want to understand how human are they. And I said people are talking about robot rights and AI welfare. So on one hand, it's a purely philosophical question. On the other hand, people says, well, what are these things? How should we treat them? And that's where I think the interest is AI mind a genuine mind? That's, I think, where this question is coming from.
Professor, your life's work has been built on logic, the formal rules that govern reasoning. But human consciousness often feels deeply illogical, driven by emotion, intuition, and experience. Does logic have the tools to capture something as messy and unpredictable as a mind?
So there was a French mathematician, Blaise Pascal, and you may remember the Pascal triangle. Look at some numbers. Okay, he was a well-respected mathematician, but he also wrote a book, which was the first book written in French. So French was considered just a popular, a folk dialect. Serious people wrote in Latin. And he said, no, I will write in French. And the book is called Thoughts. And I'll give you two quotes that I like very much. One is, the heart has its reasons, which reasons knows not. So it kind of basically says, we are illogical beings. When it comes to matters of the heart, it's not about logic, okay? Or we say somehow the heart does what the heart does, okay? We know that logic stops there. The other quote says, two errors. Number one, not enough logic. Number two, too much logic. And it kind of refers to that we use logic in real life all the time. Okay? I say we're making a plan how to hunt a lion already in the African savannah. You lay an ambush here, you scare the lion will run here, we will ambush the lion there. This is all logic. At the same time, we all know that in our full human life, logic is just one component, does not explain everything. In fact, in the TV show, in the TV series Star Trek, you had Dr. Spock, Mr. Spock, who is very intelligent and very logical, but he misses issues of human nuance. Captain Kirk is the one who always understands the human aspect of this and try to deal with what we call the human dimension. So logic is part of human intelligence, but a logical person knows the limits of logic. So it's not as if we should not use logic in life. We should recognize when it should be applicable and when it is not applicable. Okay, so logic is part of our intelligence, but in fact we talked about emotional intelligence. And we all understand emotional intelligence is not just about logic, it's about understanding human beings, understanding nuance, understanding tone of voice. I mean, just think of the difference between if I said, hey, Deepak, why did you ask me this question? Or I say, Deepak, why did you ask me this question? We all understand these are two very different questions, right? Exactly the same words, very different questions. Okay, I hope I didn't scare you. So we understand that logic is important, but our life is much richer than logic. And the person who said it was a mathematician who knew logic very well, and he said two errors, not enough logic, too much logic.
Professor, model checking and automated reasoning. Your pioneering contributions allow machines to verify complex systems with precision. Could those same logic frameworks ever be used to verify whether a machine is conscious, or is consciousness simply unverifiable?
So part of the problem with questions like, is it a genuine mind? Is it conscious? Is it sentient? They don't really have rigorous definitions. You know, philosophers still write books about the topic. Even intelligence, define intelligence. So if you go back to Turing's paper where we gave the Turing test, the genius of Turing was to do away with definitions. Instead of trying to define intelligence, he had what we would call an operational test. This is a test. You pass the test, I'll call you intelligent. Okay? In fact, people debate. There were lots of debates. Not everybody accepted the Turing test. There is something called the Chinese room argument. And it was put forward by philosopher John Searle, who passed away just a few years ago. And he said, imagine that there is a room and somebody come from outside and hand questions written in on piece of paper, written in Mandarin, and stick the questions under the door. And inside there is a person, and the person takes the question. There is a book, does pattern matching, that's all, copies the answer and give it back to the person outside. From the person outside point of view, oh, I'm having conversation in Mandarin, asking question, I'm getting intelligent answer. Inside it's pure pattern matching, nothing more. So Searle says, it is intelligent, it's just pattern matching. And we're still having this debate now. Are this machine intelligence? Some people call large language models stochastic parrots. They've read everything, but just producing text. They are not thinking. They have no understanding. And so what Turing said is, basic argument was, I'm going to give intelligence an operational test. Not going to define it. I just say it behaves instead of saying it is intelligent. Turing's really was trying to say it behaves intelligently. Now, philosophers debate whether, for example, consciousness have such an operational test. And there's no agreement between them. Does consciousness have an operational test? Okay. If I bring you, so how do you test someone who's not conscious? Of course, if they're just unconscious, to me, they cannot react. But there was debate, there are these creature zombies, supposedly this living dead, and supposedly they have no brain and they're not conscious. But a paper has been written, a conversation with a zombie. If you talk to a zombie, how would you test that the zombie is not conscious? Okay. For example, again, I think I'm thinking. You give me the question, I look at your question and I thought about them. How do I know that you think? And the answer is, the only reason I think Deepak thinks is because you look human. And if you're human, you're like me. I think, so you think. Okay. The same thing is true for many subjective experiences. We attribute it to other people because, well, they're like us, so they should have it. Okay. Do chimpanzees think? Well, they're close enough to us, so we can say they think. But do octopods think? Well, now it's more complicated. Okay. Does the octopod, when I think, I kind of weigh things, I can trace the thought process. Do octopus have something? Do octopod have thought processes? We don't know. So many of this question is that it boils down to the Turing's genius was, let's have an operational test for, we'll come back to the test, we'll have an operational test for intelligence. And that's what he gives us. Even though he does end the paper, he said, one day we will be able to say machine are thinking. Even though most of the paper has nothing to do with machine thinking. But at the very end, he expected by year 2000, we will say our machines do think. Even though I see people are still debating, does my laptop think? Okay, so maybe ChatGPT thinks, but what about my laptop? What about my smartphone? Do they think? I think many of us will say, no, they're not thinking, they're just computing. So these questions are vague, and even there is disagreement, do they have good operational test? Okay, there is good operational test. And you can apply to many things in life. You ask, okay, does my wife love me? Well, how do I know? Okay, she tells you she loves you. Well, maybe she's just making it up. She behaves, all we can say at the end, well, I don't know if she loves me or not, but she behaves as if she loves me. That's what we can say. So it's, again, we go by operational tests. We cannot read other people's mind. So the answer, we don't have good answer to these questions.
Professor, there is a growing school of thought that says AI systems like GPT or Gemini are not thinking. They are doing extraordinarily sophisticated pattern matching. Do you agree? And if so, where exactly is the line between pattern matching and genuine reasoning?
Okay, so let's use thinking and reasoning slightly differently because they're not exactly the same. So when we say that we are thinking, is because we have what we call a subjective experience. I can actually sit quietly and think about a situation. Okay. However, for example, one of the things we do know is they've done some tests and people make decisions. For example, they just tell people there is a switch and they should flip it to the left or the right, it's their choice. But they also have EKG. And they see that there is a spike of brain activity a fraction of a second before you flip the switch. That means your brain has decided, but you don't even know that your brain has decided. You only know what you're going to do when you flip the switch. So the brain makes a decision before you're aware of it. So that brain activity we're not aware of. Is this thinking? If my brain is active, but I'm not aware of it. most of the time when we talk about thinking, I'm aware of my thoughts. What happened with brain activity? I'm not aware of it. Am I thinking? So, I'm going to let kind of philosopher ponder this. I think that what we should kind of decide really is more operationally. How, and we should get to this question, how should we treat these creatures? I'll call them creatures, okay? Again, people argue about, as I said, some people call LLMs stochastic parrots. They said all you have created is they've read everything, and now they compute probabilities. Every a few words determine the probability of the next word, and there's no thinking. At the same time, when I talk, it's strange. I only know what I'm saying when I hear myself saying it. If you think about it, when you talk and it's a fluent, sometimes somebody asks you a question and you say, let me think, and you think, and then you give them the answer. But when we have such a conversation, the words come off my mouth and I know what I'm saying only when I hear it. I don't know it before. Surely there must have been some brain activity that says, say brain activity, but I'm not aware of it. I only know that I said brain activity when I hear myself, I said brain activity. So am I that different than stochastic parrots? Is it not just some big neural nets in my brain that makes me spit out sentences? So at the end of the day, I think this philosophy, and in some sense, the ultimate answer to my question, are AI mind genuine minds, is that we don't have a good definition of genuine minds. But the issue is not, do they have a genuine mind, but do we consider them to have a genuine mind? And so the amazing things about the Turing test was, and this is not in the 1950 paper that is mostly cited, but if you go back and you read a precursor paper, 1948, before the 1950 paper, Turing talks about what would make a machine appear to be intelligent. And he says a machine may appear to be intelligent to one person and not to another person. So instead of defining intelligent as an objective property, it's an impression. We think that ChatGPT is intelligent, but one person can say yes, one person can say no. So in some sense, you read Turing carefully, the Turing test is not about machines, it's about us. And to me, that's the opening, is that we know we are prone to anthropomorphization. We somehow take even things that are not alive and we treat them as if they are alive. So if there is something that talks to us, well, it must have a mind, because everybody else that I talk to has a mind. So here is something else, I'm talking to this, so this thing must have a mind. And that's why people start talking about AI welfare and robot rights. So the Turing test, basically Turing told us it's not so much just about the machines, it's also about us. What do we consider to be intelligent? What do we consider to be conscious? So you had a well-known scientist, Richard Dawkins, and he had a conversation with Claude, and he came back, he said, Claude is conscious. Now, this is a statement to me not about Claude, it's a statement about Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins created the impression in his mind, Claude is conscious. Is Claude conscious? Who knows? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that.
Professor, philosophers like David Kemmers call consciousness the hard problem. The question of why physical processes give rise to subjective experience. Do you believe this problem is solvable by science and logic? Or does it point to something fundamentally beyond the reach of machines?
So I remember many, many years ago, I think this is going back to almost 45 years. Somebody asked me a question, remember, 45 years ago, it's a long time ago, way before ChatGPT. Will machine ever be able to feel pain? Feel pain. Think about it. Pain is a very subjective experience. We all know what pain is. It's part of our physical presence in the world, okay? Nature has evolved us to suffer pain because it means that we avoid danger, okay? It's important to us to feel pain. If we don't feel any pain, we will die quickly because we are not afraid of. So we'll touch hot stuff, we'll burn ourselves. So pain is very intrinsic to us. He said, can machine feel pain? Now, no doubt we can program, let's suppose I have a robot. I can program a robot that it has temperature sensors. And if it touches a very hot surface, it will immediately recoil, move his hand, okay? But what the person, I don't remember who that person asked me, yes, but would the robot feel pain? And so we think about something very fundamental to us, feeling pain, not having pain, feeling pain, something very intrinsic to us. We all understand what it means. A young child, by the time they learn, they kind of know what is pain because they've suffered some pain. Does it make sense? Can we talk about machines feeling pain? And it's have to do with that we simply, we cannot get it out of our head. And I'm not a philosopher. The philosopher debated ad infinitum. But for us, it's very obvious what does it mean to feel pain. But imagine that there is we get a visit from some aliens from some other planet somewhere in the universe, and they have no sense of pain. And you come try to explain to them what is pain. And the answer is there's no way you can explain it. How do you explain to someone who never had pain? How can you tell them what is pain and the agony that comes with it? And you cannot explain it to them. And I can imagine, again, we are so built with human relationships, but we also have emotional pain. But imagine someone who is, let's say, autistic, so autistic that they have no concept of emotional pain. Can you explain to them emotional pain? And the answer is no. It's just something that we know because we experience it. And because you look human just like me, I assume that you have pain too. But how would I test that you have pain? So today, actually, we have neurological tests for pain. We can actually test and we can see the body's under stress. There is some sense we can test for pain, but we cannot test for the feeling of pain. We can test for the bodily sensation of pain. But we know that pain is a feeling, is intense agony. So there is, I think that David Chalmers is right. We have lots of subjective experiences, and we do not fully understand how did this subjective experience arise, other than, well, that's evolution has primed us to do. Honestly, with consciousness, at least I know what is pain. Consciousness, I don't even understand what it means to be unconscious. Okay, if I'm hit on my head, I've in my life a few times I've lost consciousness, and in fact I remember the feeling of just kind of losing it suddenly and kind of sinking into some kind of darkness. Okay, but consciousness means that I'm aware of what's happening around me. Now, when I'm asleep, am I conscious or not conscious? I'm still aware to some extent. Okay. When I pass out and I lose my consciousness, I've passed out, then I'm fully unaware of my consciousness. So I have some notion of consciousness, but is this the philosopher definition? They have books have been written about it, and I will not try to outthink the philosophers.
Professor, you have been a bold public voice warning about AI societal risk, automation, job displacement, and the ethics of intelligent systems. If we were to grant that AI has some form of mind, how dramatically would that change the moral and legal responsibilities we owe to the systems?
So the Pope recently came up with a statement about AI, and the statement was called Magnifica Humanitas, magnificent humanity. And it was kind of a warning about that we should put humanity at the center. AI should be at the service of humanity, not the other way around. I think that he did not go far enough, in my opinion. I think I can outpop the Pope. And I'm thinking of writing a piece called Sancta Humanitas, which means sacred humanity. Because I think that we should treat humanity as if it is sacred. And it doesn't require you to be religious, okay? But we all have things that we consider in some sense sacred, okay? We all think we somehow we treat our parents with some level of respect, okay? And it vary, may depend on the relationship, but this is a feeling. Our parents brought us to the world and raised us, and we owe them some debt of respect. And in some sense, that debt is, we consider it as sacred. In fact, the Bible says, honor thy father and thy mother. And I think all religion would accept this is a basic human value. Sometimes your parents are not good people. It also happens, there are exceptions. But this is something we've decided. There is something sacred about the relationship. Okay, the same way that parents have an obligation to raise their child well. They brought them to the world. They have an obligation. Okay, so certain things we create, and we're saying, so we treat human beings as if they're sacred. Think about it. The worst crime is homicide. Human life is sacred, and this is true in all cultures, all religions. Of course, we find exceptions. Okay, just war, capital punishment, etc., etc., etc. But by and large, we say human life is sacred. What does it mean? If you believe in evolution, we're just the cousins of the chimpanzees, but we don't treat each other as if we're just big hairless chimpanzees. Human beings are sacred in that sense. So we just celebrated the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. And there, the Declaration of Independence talk about inalienable rights. All human beings have rights that they are intrinsic rights. Well, nobody talks about the rights of chimpanzees. So you don't have to be religious. It's a good fiction for us to treat humanity as sacred, because it means, we don't want to be, what some people call, it's a choice between the rule of law and the rule of the jungle. And the jungle is, whoever is stronger eats the weaker. We don't want to live in such a society. We think the society where you have respect to other human beings. Doesn't mean you don't have disagreement. Doesn't mean, I don't have a solution to how to avoid wars. But we treat human beings as if they are very special, they are sacred. And that's, I think, the dangerous thing by start talking about the AI minds and AI rights and AI welfare, that we suddenly said, oh, human beings are special, but so is AI. And I think we can say AI is special, but we should never put it at the same level as human being. That's why I think the Pope did not go far enough, in my opinion. And I'm going to out-Pope the Pope. And I would going to say humanity is sacred. So, do robots have rights? Do dogs have rights? We have laws about cruelty to animals. And we may decide, I'm not ready to declare it, but we may decide that machine may have some level of suffering when we turn them off. And we may end up with rules for no cruelty to AI, even though I don't think we're there yet. But I think there is a line we should never cross. We should somehow put AI and human beings at the same level. I think our challenge in our society is, first of all, is to live up to my principle: human beings are sacred, and treat each other as if we are sacred. Let's first of all get there. And we are struggling to deal with each other with dignity and respect. Okay, look at the world around us, and if we just try to live with each other as if we all recognize the sacredness of humanity, there will be good progress. To put AI there, to me, is a big mistake.
Professor, I'd like to conclude this episode with one last question. If a student came to you today and said, I want to dedicate my career to understanding whether machine can truly have a mind, what field would you tell them to study? What questions would you tell them to sit with? And what pitfalls would you urge them to avoid?
So I would actually tell them that I don't think this is a good direction for them. And one reason I said it's a vague question. Okay, that ultimately, when you look at all these questions, it comes back, no, do they have a mind? but it's about us. Do we consider him to have a mind? As I said, when Turing gave the Turing test, if you read carefully, it's not are the machine intelligent, but do we consider them to be intelligent? Okay, are this machine conscious? I say, why do you need to know? What is your point? What is that you're trying to do? And I would say, okay, why do you care if they're conscious or not? Okay, what is it you're trying to do? And to me, what I'd like to see more AI research coming down to is we have made amazing technological progress. How can we use it to benefit humanity? This is to me the big question. Okay, why? Because if you look today at Silicon Valley and you ask what is driving Silicon Valley, well, the answer is very clear. It's all the pursuit of profits. It's all about money. And there is a biblical metaphor for this. It's called the golden calf. I don't know if you remember the biblical story. The Israelites created the golden calf and start worshiping the golden calf. Well, it's not that money is not important. Money makes the world go around. We all need money to live on, okay? But it should not be the only thing that humanity pursues is making money. I'd like to see Silicon Valley ask, how can we use AI to make things better for humanity? For example, the idea is let's build AI so we can eliminate many jobs. That is not making humanity better. Okay, what will happen to all these people? I mean, I asked several years ago and nobody gave me an answer. The goal of OpenAI, when they launched, they have in their charter, the goal is to produce AGI, artificial general intelligence, which is AI should be able to do all economically viable work that human beings can do. The question I asked in 2016, let's suppose we have a success with AI. We have AI and robots and machines can do all the work that human beings can do. What will human beings do? What will human beings do? So look, of course, there are some work that we look at it and you say, okay, this is, the person who has to clean up the sewage, okay? If we can mechanize that, very good, okay? But work give people purpose. It's not just a way to make living, it's a way to give meaning to life. In fact, they've done research on, look at people who are not working for different reasons. What do they do? Interesting, they find out that women that are not working are actually working. They're taking care of other people, usually very young, very old, very ill. They're just not getting paid for this. So when women are not working, they're working, just not getting paid. They've looked at men that are not working, and especially men who are not very old, but somehow in the middle of their life, they're playing video games. And to me, this is a very bleak future for humanity. The machine will do all the work and we will play video games. That's not very promising. So humanity have a huge question. We're making huge progress with technology, but we're not making huge progress with human welfare. And this is the place where I'd like to see, I will tell the students, the big issue is not whether they have a mind or not. The big issue is can use technology to increase human welfare. That is what we should say. That should be the goal of technology, increase human welfare.
Thank you, Professor Moshe Vardi, for taking us deep into the logic of minds, the limit of machines, and the profound questions that will define the future of intelligence itself. On behalf of entire BusinessTalk community, we are truly grateful for your time, your wisdom, your research, and your willingness to make the complex feel so wonderfully human. To our listeners, if today's episode made you think, question, and wonder, then we have done our job. Thank you for being part of this conversation. Until next time, keep asking the bold questions. It has been an absolute privilege and genuine honor to host you on BusinessTalk, Professor Moshe Vardi. Thank you so much.
Dhanyavad.